Okay. So, hi everyone, good evening, and welcome to yet another series of IRMAN Talks. Today, our speaker for the day is Shruti Kapoor from PRM 33. And the person who's going to moderate today's show is Mridul Dhaniwala. He's also from PRM 33. And apart from being batchmates, I think Mridul has a lot of experience about more than a decade in the areas of livelihood, financial and digital inclusion, and entrepreneurship. And in his previous roles, Mridul has managed the strategy and operations of large-scale youth-led and women-led rural skilling, leadership and entrepreneurship schemes. He loves eating, cooking, watching movies, traveling, and playing chess. And currently, he's enjoying a break in his career by traveling, cooking, and figuring out what else lies in his store today. So that's about Mridul. Welcome, Mridul, and
Thank you.
I will also take this opportunity to introduce Shruti to y'all. Um, I was so mesmerized reading what all Shruti does that while we were discussing, we said, "Yaar, pura batana padega." We have to talk about everything because everything is so relevant and so nice that I really want to talk about everything. So be with me and hear this out. Shruti holds an MA in public policy from University of Chicago, and she leads the economic opportunities pillar at UVA, which comprises of job connects, entrepreneurship, and apprenticeship opportunities for young people. And she has about a decade of work experience in social impact and sustainability, spanning across India, US, and UAE. She has led Pan India program operations and business development at McKinsey Social Initiatives Youth Education to Employment Program. And she is extremely passionate about impacting education, youth employment, gender equality, and environment sustainability through strategic design and analysis, policy advocacy, data-driven decision making, and implementation of policies and programs. So not only this, I mean, she's exceptionally brilliant at her work, but she loves to dance, she loves traveling, she writes poems in Hindi and English, and helps young people in their career path. So more about this, let's hear from Mridul what they have in store for us today. Welcome both of you, Shruti and Mridul, to this show. I really hope and I also believe that this show is a very strong medium of reaching out to IRMANs. I had conceptualized and I started this show uh, on the premise that we IRMANs really do not know each other in the current scenario. We don't know what each of us is doing. So this is a medium to know you much better and be as comfortable as possible in this show. Please feel free. And Ridul, over to you. Please take
Yeah,
over.
thank you. Thank you, Richie. So I think Richie did highlight a lot about what Shruti is currently doing in terms of her workspace, but I have the opportunity to know her very closely as a friend and also as a colleague. So the only thing I'll probably add in terms of just the qualities she brings to her work, I think she's extremely sincere. She's very, very perseverant. And she makes sure that she takes her program to like the goal that the program and the organization and she intends for it to. So I think in that sense, she's probably one of the most sincere professionals I know, and I've also had the privilege to work with her in on a very small project um, as well. So yeah, that, and we will of course, like through the talk, we will try to touch upon some keener aspects of the work that she has done, right? Also, if there are any questions at any point in time, please feel free to write them out in the chat box, and I'll probably at an opportune time ask Shruti any of those. Okay, so Shruti, if you can just start with sort of talking a bit about your journey post IRMA in brief, and probably highlight a little bit more about what exactly did the public policy course at Chicago entail, and how did that sort of help, or was it something new? Was it something drastic than your experience at IRMA, and how did that sort of change your path? If we could start with that, and then probably we could go from there.
Thank you, Mridul, and thank you, Ruchi, for the introduction. And good evening, everyone. Great to see you all. I think I probably know almost everybody here, maybe except a couple of people. Um, okay, so I think IRMA, of course, was a very, very fulfilling experience. It, I can like safely, hands down, say that it just changed my life in many ways, not just professionally, but also personally. And I think I always write about this. People who know me closely and they follow me, they know that I've always written about this, that more than I think professionally and more than the theoretical things that I learned in IRMA, I think the values that it instilled in me and the person that I eventually became because of IRMA is something that I've always been very grateful and thankful for. I don't think any other institution could have done that to me ever. Um, but from there on, my first placement was at BRLPS Jivika. I hail from Bihar. That's where I am born and brought up. So went back to kind of my own territory to try something, do something. I was posted near Nepal border in a block for about 6 months. Worked there, didn't quite enjoy. I think the challenges were just too many. I tried to take care of the situation and do things as much as possible, but I think after a point in time, I realized that I can't be a good development professional till the time I am not mentally sane myself. If I'm losing out on my health, whether it is physical or mental, there is no way that I can impact the lives of people. So probably this is not the right time for me to be here and do anything. Um, and that's the reason why I kind of just left it in 6 months. I was also getting married at that point in time, so that was another reason why I thought that it probably just makes sense to get out of here right now. I joined an NGO called Sehgal Foundation in Gurgaon, a small NGO working in Mewat district of Haryana, which is also one of the socially very underprivileged and less developed sort of region, and Alwar district in Rajasthan. So while the geography was small, the good thing about Segal Foundation was it gave me a lot of exposure to run end-to-end programming by myself. The team was small, so I got a lot more opportunity to do things hands-on, to lead the projects. Those were smaller projects, but then doing things end-to-end means that I imbibed a lot of skills at the same point in time. I learned how to write funding proposals for donors, even if it was for small donors, it did add some skills and value in me. And then building the capability of grassroots team, mobilizing, delivering training by myself. 3 times a week I was in the field, from morning till night, delivering trainings by myself. Developing budgets, making sure that the budgets are utilized well, submitting program reports. So all the end-to-end operations of program is what I really learned there. I worked there for about 2 years. It was a very, very fulfilling experience, but then I did realize at some point in time that now I feel like I want to work on bigger projects. McKinsey at that time was just starting its education to employment program. So it started as a very small team within McKinsey and Company, and I think before me there were just 3 people on the program. I was literally the fourth person to be hired. Uh, and it was still a concept, it was still an idea when I joined, very, very theoretical in terms of getting conceptualized. Um, when I joined, it was almost like working for a startup, figuring things out from the scratch, but also uh, learning how consultants really work. Things were very, very fast paced compared to the small NGO from where I was coming. They immediately wanted to start in one geography and move to the next one. So that kind of just expedited a lot. Like my style of working basically got expedited. Uh, I was posted initial first 6 months. I was posted in Jaipur. I set up the city operations there, and then I got relocated to Delhi, and then I gradually started managing operations, program operations for 7 states in North India, and then eventually led to managing operations across 23 cities in India. So there was team deputed everywhere. So meeting with those teams, liaising with them on day-to-day basis, was exceptional. But I think at some point in time, I also realized that operations is what I have learned now. I know end to end what program operations mean for any level of project. So why not try something else? And they were very kind to trust me with other responsibilities. And so this got me involved into business development. That's when I think my presentation skills, communication skills, how to read what the partner on the other side of the table wants from you, how to convince them for funding. All of those things is what I really learned while doing business development. Required extensive amount of travel to remotest parts of the country, because we were also figuring out how to prevent migration. All typical skilling programs in India usually will have training centers in the remote places, but jobs, unfortunately, are all located in major cities. And so there's a lot of migration involved, which has its own pros and cons. So we're also figuring out how to take care of that and find hyperlocal employment, make people stay closer to their homes and not break families. Very, very interesting project. Uh, Again, worked there for a little over 2 years. I think that's when I kind of realized that, uh, in the skilling and employment space, in the youth development sort of space, I have picked up a lot of things. What was really lacking or missing in my entire gamut of skill sets was uh, uh, how policies are really made, what goes behind policy, how policy advocacy happens, how data runs behind all of this. If you have to run large scale pan India programs, McKinsey was still small in the sense in terms of numbers that we were able to give jobs to say about 6,000-7,000 people in a year. But what would it really take to crack that for millions of people was a question mark for the entire team. It still is, by the way. There are very few pan India scalable programs which also retain their quality. Uh, so yeah, I think that kind of made me think that what is it that I can do in life next. I started researching some programs. Chicago coincidentally just happened because I actually didn't apply anywhere. A very interesting story. I think University of Chicago at that time ran a program for that year called India at 100. So they wanted to target top 20 MBA institutes in India, and they wanted them to recommend 5 of their alumni or students who were interested in pursuing a public policy degree from Chicago. And that notice also came to IRMA. Somebody from IRMA circulated it that we want to nominate 5 people. If you're interested, give your name, share your profile. And I did. And I got shortlisted. Because of that, I was exempted from U Chicago application fees. I was provided personal counseling and guidance sessions at University of Chicago in Delhi. So it was again a very IRMA connect, and that's when I seriously started thinking about it. That I can see that there is a way forward, and I didn't apply to any other institute actually. I got through University of Chicago. That's when I seriously started thinking about moving after I finally cracked it. I got some scholarship also, so that helped in the movement. I think I did a 1 year program, I think very thoughtfully. I initially rolled for the 2 years program. That's where when people go to masters in US, usually the flagship programs are of 2 years. But I think I also realized that I didn't want to learn data analysis, and public policy courses in the US are usually very data centric. I knew that I wanted to understand how data runs behind the machinery, but I knew that I wasn't the person who wants to sit at the laptop and crunch the numbers. I didn't want to go into a research sort of role. That wasn't my calling. And therefore, I realized that 1 year program probably works best to me in terms of ROI as well as in terms of just grabbing whatever I can get. It was an exceptional experience. I was really able to stitch all my grassroots experience, everything that I had learned in India with the kind of case studies that I was taught. I knew that I wanted to continue working in the employment sector, and I wanted to work in the gender space. So the subjects that I chose there while at University of Chicago, my optional subjects were things like family policy, women in the labor market. Strategically, I kind of chose those subjects to start building my portfolio in the same domain. Um, so I think, yeah, while I learned a lot of coding and research related stuff, I think it just broadened my perspective for good, and that was the best thing that happened while being in the US for nearly 2 years. And after graduating from there, I landed up with a short internship for about 4 months at UN in New York. That again led to another level of exposure to really understand how international organizations function. What is it that, how does big decision making happen? What is the role of data versus what is the role of all the lobbying and all the other political things that go behind in terms of making those shifts. So I was just able to put a lot of things in together and stitch them very well. And then my husband was working in Dubai at that time. So I think I kind of realized that I need to move back with him. I was done with US. Yeah, so I got a job in Dubai. I was working for a bank, national bank here as a sustainability consultant. So that opened my opportunities in sustainability. This was also the time when COVID had hit. So I didn't apply too much of head into what I was getting and whether I was utilizing stuff or not, but I just started working with whatever I got hold of. Again, it was a different experience completely. I had never worked for a bank, so I learned the in and out of how a bank functions. And at the same time, sustainability, climate change sustainability was a new space for me. So I learned a lot about that. But I think after the market started opening up after COVID, after working there for 1.5 years, I realized that this is not something that I want to sustain into. I want to go back. I want to make use of whatever I have learned and whatever I had planned for myself. And that's when UNICEF happened. Yeah, so I lead uh, uh, the youth employment program at UNICEF. So I look into jobs, apprenticeship, and entrepreneurship opportunities for young people. It's been 3 years. It just feels like yesterday. It's been a very, very interesting journey because the learning never stops at UNICEF. It's a whole portfolio of things to just keep learning. There are newer things that are coming in. Till now, gender was a cross-cutting lens that I have always used in all my programming. Going forward, climate change has become a priority. So it's now gender and climate change is a cross-cutting lens in all the work that I do. Yeah. So yeah, that's about it.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks, Shruti. So, of course, this is a great segue for us to then talk about what are some of the 2 or 3 top things that you are currently doing at UNICEF, and as the lead for economic opportunities, what is the kind of landscape you look at? Like, what are the decisions that you take? What are the 2, 3 big ticket things that you look at as the lead at UVA right now?
Yeah. So I think one, of course, I think operations never stops in any role. I think that's what I've come to realize, that program operations is key to when you're working in the social development sector. And that's also something that that actually forms the crux of any project. So now I work in an organization that's almost like 10,000, 20,000 feet above the ground. It's no more that hands-on as it used to be a few years back. While I love doing that part, this is a very, very different experience. A lot of my time actually goes in co-creating programs with different partners. So it's different people who already have their strength and who already have that field team and capability and skills to implement things on the ground. They take care of all of that. But my job literally is to bring all of those people together, whether it's civil society organizations, it's state government, central government, it's young people themselves, private organizations, etc. So everybody coming together to exchange resources, knowledge, and co-create large-scale program. Large scale being the key word here because that's something that I always wanted to do. And the team that I work for, which is called Yuva, the premise on which is based, which it's based is basically solving complex problems, but keeping scale in mind. If that problem can only solve if a solution can only solve something for say 10,000 people, then that's not something that we want to intervene into. It's great, but it's not scalable, and therefore we stop there. So it's been a tremendous amount of learning there in terms of co-creating programs with different partners and involving too many people in on one thematic area. I think second, a lot of time, my time is devoted to policy advocacy. No large scale change in the country happens, or no large scale programs become successful without the intervention of the government. So a lot of my time is actually devoted to working very closely with secretaries and joint secretaries in the ministry, uh, reviewing the policies, drawing insights from various places and recommending them for changes, making sure that those recommendations get incorporated somewhere. And third, I think youth centrality forms a very important part of my work because again, the whole premise on which you are, or the whole objective on which you are works is that young people are going to form the future force of the workforce of the country. So it's important for us to know, while most things are market driven, it's also important for us to know what they want, and not just from a very tokenistic perspective, but really incorporate their perspective and their views in while creating the programs. So engaging youth as part of the work, as not just for a dialogue, but making sure that they have a lens to whatever we do, is core part of my work. Yeah, so those three things I
Right,
would say.
right. So, I mean, you spoke about youth centrality, and like something that comes to my mind is that I mean, ever since the advent of how deeply internet is now entrenched in our lives, and correct me if I'm wrong, I do understand that the aspirations of youth have undergone like a major shift, right? So I mean, how do you, as the lead for economic opportunities, what are the challenges that you have seen in the last 2, 3 years after like this huge impact that social media and internet has had on youth aspirations, and how do you sort of tackle those challenges when it comes to like youth centrality in all the work that you do?
Um, yeah, I think first I'll come to the challenge a bit later, but I'll also talk about
Sure.
the good things of youth centrality maybe first. I think where we have seen tremendous amount of contribution that youth centrality brings in is when it comes to volunteering, when it comes to civic engagement, when it comes to getting their views and perspectives. If you have to conduct large scale surveys and if you want to hear from them that what is it that you really want, there is very, very active participation from young people. And all of that is possible because of technology, because of how easy things have become. It's a click of a button and you can respond. Um, and so they are very easy, and where there are very like user friendly tools that are available to conduct these surveys now. So I think that has helped us bring forward a lot of young people from the remotest part of the country, give them a seat at the decision making table, and really call out what is it that they want. They are very opinionated, very confident, clearly know what they want, and that's the great part about the work. It's actually great to see like 15, 18 years old, 18-year-old young people talking like that. I don't think I even had that much of sense in me while I was 18. So it's very very empowering to see them that ways. The challenges basically comes as soon as we move from that volunteering, civic engagement and learning to actually getting them into employment and job related opportunities. So while they say that their priority is to get work, obviously without economic opportunities, without getting money in hand, there is only so much that voice will be able to do. There's a huge aspiration mismatch, I would say. It has always been there in the ecosystem, but it has even more increased with the penetration of digital tools, easy internet, especially social media, because what you see on the social media is basically what you aspire for, which is not true. But and with even if subconsciously you understand that what you are seeing on social media is not true and it's a lot of it is just created, even then you are not ready to believe it and your aspiration just remains there, and that has caused a major flux. It's very, very surprising. A couple of my team members were on the field last month, and they were in like some of the aspirational districts and very remote parts and tribal parts of Jharkhand and Odisha. Uh, but when they spoke to young people, these were people as young as 18, 20 years old, about to enter into the workforce and job market, as to what do you want, they were like, we don't want anything. They were just happy having the mobile phones in hand, scrolling them for whatever reasons, but didn't want anything. As long as they were getting food that their family was providing them, uh, they were like, "Humko kuch karna hi nahi hai," which was very, very surprising. There were very like probing questions that were asked that, then do you, is it because you feel lost? Is it because you feel that there's a need for career guidance? We can get you free counseling services. They didn't even want that. And I think that's very uh, disheartening in some sense. That also acts as a caveat and a barrier to say in terms of the work that I do, that if you don't want it, then what is it that you're going to do in the future? Because there's just lack of clarity. There is aspiration mismatch at the middle class level, uh, in the sense that if the salaries are less, they will not want to work because they are not dying for food. As long as it's not a necessity for you to sustain yourself and your family, and it comes down to literally buying bread for yourself, nobody is really dying for work here. They are okay to quit. They are okay to sit back home. Again, as I said, it has very like dichotomous perspective in that sense, that it's also empowering that you're not settling for less, but at the same time, it's also not very comfortable for the parents or for the family. They are not able to understand what is it that you really want.
Okay, so that sounds ominous, but also I think as IRMANs, that is also like some thought for all of us to take back and see how at our own workspaces and through our own work we are able to sort of touch and solve for this problem, because this seems more ominous than just sort of giving jobs as such. Shruti, one thing that sort of came to my mind while you were narrating your experiences, you spoke about how gender has been a lens through which you viewed your work as well as the general world, and you've also sort of seen the skill development ecosystem right from its nascent stages to what you're doing now. Um, we speak about how the situation is continuously improving. When it comes to like skilling and sort of employing women, do you think the situation has actually improved? If yes, then if you could sort of cite some sort of your experiences of that, and if not, then what are the one or two big challenges that you still see from a gender lens that sort of percolates the work that you do?
So it's very fragmented, to be honest. The situation has improved, I wouldn't deny that, but it has also improved only at a certain level. A lot of big companies have paved way for more women to come in. There is more seriousness around the gender ratio, gender equality, even though not so much at the leadership, most senior leadership position or the board members. I would say there are, like, in my own experience, there are so many panels on which I go to and speak, and I am still not surprised that there's not even a single woman beside me, and there are all men sitting on that same panel. So, not saying that it has improved dramatically, but yeah, I think a lot of big companies have definitely seemed to make a lot more effort, and they have good policies with, CSR earlier, and gender equality was earlier just limited to HR, and it was their mandate and their agenda to believe in inclusivity and somehow percolated inside the organization. I think the seriousness has grown that everybody else also besides an HR has become sensitive about what it is, and within their own teams how they can be more caring towards women, more understanding towards women. However, the situation, I think, beyond the big companies still seems very, very grim to me. I don't see, because at the end of the day, people are concerned about profits. They are running big organizations. Whatever gives them profit is what they're going to do. And so the moment, and since there is nothing to prove, I don't think there is even a concrete study to say that what is the business cost of hiring a woman? What is it that you're losing? But also, what are the things that you're gaining in your business? What is the monetary value of really having a woman and retaining it in your organization is something that very, very few organizations still understand beyond the bigger ones. And there the situation is still grim. So those challenges still remain. And moving down to like MSMEs and smaller organizations, that again, the situation has remained as constant as I saw it probably 10 years back. Something that we have been thinking around, why it's very, very experimental at the moment, is that what if more and more companies were to shift a certain percentage of the jobs in their entire portfolio to fully remote. Now that's going to come with its own challenges. A lot of technological intervention will be required. We don't know about efficiency of working, women working from the comfort of their homes. Those are still the questions that need to be figured out. But is there a possibility that maybe the entire gamut of opportunities that are available for women in the first place goes up, and there is categorically labels saying that this job is only for women, or only a woman is meant to be hired for it because it's fully remote or hybrid sort of opportunity? Because that takes care of, at least in some parts, it takes care of a lot of social barriers that they have, a lot of community related challenges that they have in terms of stepping out of their home, the safety issues associated with traveling, migration, living in other cities, and probably at the same time, uh, giving them a handful of money that would at least make them feel financially independent. And salaries might not be same. Somebody working in Delhi at the same position coming to office every day will obviously get more money than somebody who is working from doing the same work sitting in her own village with the help of a laptop. uh, but it is still some sort of independence and financial independence that she's gaining. And a lot of things we know for women come from financial independence. It's just not money. It's a whole lot of other rippling effect that gets created because of it. So that's a very small experiment that we started this year to see if remote jobs can really solve for the problem of decreasing women employment in some sense, and can we convince companies beyond the bigger organizations to take this a little more seriously. But yeah, that's the only amount of change that I've seen so far.
Okay, so I think a follow-up question to this, which was asked by Chidambaram sir, and I also have a follow-up question. I think he's asking whether that finding livelihood training for women is limited and what can be done to solve for that. And I think my follow, because I have also worked in that space, like entrepreneurship is often talked about as the solution to all ills with respect to employment. Like, what has been your experience with respect to entrepreneurship at scale? I mean, I know there are many successful programs working at sort of more smaller scales, but what has been your experience in terms of entrepreneurship at scale, especially for women?
Again, something that we have been trying to solve for altogether, but the problem remains unsolved. And there are many reasons for it. I don't think so. Entrepreneurship, I wouldn't necessarily talk in the context of women. Obviously, it serves a better purpose for women because we feel that she will be where she is and doesn't have to migrate, doesn't have to move. But in general, the whole concept of mass entrepreneurship that we keep talking about, there is no mass entrepreneurship in the country. And it's very, very likely that there won't be something called mass entrepreneurship maybe for another 5-10 years, because entrepreneurship is expensive in the first place. No good quality entrepreneurship program that really provides that end-to-end support to a person from scratch to start their business and make it into a profitable venture comes at a lesser cost. I have not heard of any successful program creating an entrepreneur uh, less than 75,000 to 80,000 per person, and that's a huge amount of money. So even if you get CSR funding for it, even if you get philanthropy funding for it, how many entrepreneurs can you create at that cost is the question. Who is going to fund for, say, 1 million entrepreneurs in the country? And that's why the whole concept of mass entrepreneurship probably is something that all of us collectively need to revisit. I was speaking to a consultant in World Bank the other day who is working on a very similar research piece and concept, and he had the same thing to say, that probably we need to revise our definition in terms of what we mean by entrepreneur first, because we don't, a lot of entrepreneurship programs are actually just skilling programs. They train people to become entrepreneur and that's about it. That's where you stop. There is no support beyond that. Or even if there is support, it's basic minimal support. Nobody's taking accountability whether you really converted your idea into a successful business venture, profitable business venture or not. And second, we also need to understand that becoming an entrepreneur requires some amount of risk. It's not something that everybody can do. And probably not everybody may have that risk appetite. You can create it to a certain extent, I think, which is why that the whole concept of entrepreneurship curriculum at the school level makes sense, because then you start building risk appetite for a kid when he's young, and then over a period of time that sustains. But suddenly somebody who has not learned, not studied, comes from a very risky background, very vulnerable background, at the age of 20, 21, you say, okay, you study this curriculum and now you start your own business with the little savings that your parents and you have had over years. Why will this person will ever want to risk their capital money without knowing anything about the concrete outcomes? So I think there is nothing called mass entrepreneurship as such, nor in the context of women, not otherwise.
Yeah, and if you could also shortly touch upon what Chidambaram sir asked in terms of livelihood opportunities for women and them being limited and what can be done to solve for that, and probably they are restricted to the traditional areas of tailoring, embroidery,
Yeah.
and how do we sort of
Yeah.
move away from that a little bit?
Yeah. Thank you, Chidambaram sir, for asking that question. Very, very pertinent and something that I just think about every day. And something that actually motivates me to wake up every day and go to my work. That why are women limited to traditional employment? Something that we've also come to realize is we don't know that at the cost at which these livelihood programs come, because they are not cheap either. 16, 20,000, 25,000 is the usual cost of a full-fledged training program, at least as per the common norms of the government. What we don't know is how effective these training are. There is, of course, they have shown good results, of course, over years in terms of the placement percentage. Retention percentages are quite low still. But the question mark really is to understand that, do women or anybody in general, do they really require that extensive livelihood training and that costly livelihood training to really get an job opportunity in today's times? We speak to a lot of employers as part of our work, and all they need is 21st century skilled people who know basic digital literacy, know basic financial literacy, very, very adaptive, resilient, have more soft skills. They are like, we are ready to take care of all the other parts of the on-job training. So is it really necessary to have that 25,000, 30,000 rupees spending, and spending whatever 3, 4, 5 months of time to give them livelihood really necessary? Or could it come at a smaller cost of providing softer skills at 2,000-3,000 rupees and then giving them quick employment within a span of, say, 2 weeks? So those are the things that we've been thinking and working about. We've been piloting and seeing whether it works or not. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I just want to add from my side, because I've also dabbled with entrepreneurship so much. I think the question that we've dabbled with is that the money you spend on sort of training a woman to be entrepreneur, why don't you just transfer that amount to her bank account and then see what magic that does, right? So the classic cash transfers versus entrepreneurship question that we sort of grapple with in this space. Okay, so another thing concept that I learned at IRMA, and I've struggled pretty much throughout my whole career, and I want to sort of ask for your experience through it. So the word called convergence that sort of gets thrown around so much in our space, and what has been like sort of your experience with convergence, since you work with so many stakeholders and you sort of try to sort of work with like companies and organizations that are already doing that work. And associated with this question is something that Chidambaram sir also asked earlier, like is it easy, how easy or hard it is to work with like state and central governments, and is that experience different now that you are working with UNICEF versus say a Sehgal Foundation or any other smaller not-for-profit? So two parts of this question, like your experience with convergence and like how easy or hard is it to work with like state and central governments as UNICEF or as like any other not-for-profit?
Yeah. Okay, coming to the first part, convergence, again, it's not easy in any way, but what we are trying to do at UNICEF is to talk about the challenges of dealing with a million people, hundreds of million people. The target is to impact the lives of 300 million young people by 2030, because that's going to be the population, young youth population of the country by 2030. And if we are talking about that kind of impact, it can't work without convergence. If you work in isolation, everybody would be reinventing the wheel. There'll be a lot of wastage of resources and wastage of money, plus wastage of experiences, and which is why convergence, which is where the whole idea of convergence comes in. I think um, it where it adds value, as I said, it helps in saving a lot of resources. But what it's cumbersome, it's difficult. You are bringing in too many people. Everybody has a very different lens to seeing the problem. There is somebody sitting at the top who is seeing the problem from a very policy perspective. There is somebody in the middle who is seeing it as part of making profit for themselves, because they are a for-profit venture, even though working for the social sector. And then there is somebody who is penetrating deep inside the community, trying to mobilize people, genuinely benefit their lives. And then there is a young person involved in between all of this, who is trying to understand what his or her aspiration is, and whether what she is getting out of this program is genuinely what she wants. Uh, so there are too many people, too many different objectives, and in that sort of that's the sort of environment that I work in every day. And so what really helps is basically building shared theory of changes. So every time there's a new thematic area, for example, say gender equality, there's a shared theory of change that UNICEF and Yuva as an organization work with, bringing all the stakeholders into one room, not just for the sake of talking, but really having concrete outcomes to understand and literally calling out the problem. As I said, since we are solving the problem at scale, we call it out very, very openly and effectively that, look, if your program is not scalable, it's very difficult for us to work with you at this point in time. But we are happy to co-create and solve the problem with you if you're willing to give it a try to replicate it in other parts of the country and to larger population. And so I think having that shared theory of change really helps. And I think that's the role that we play in the ecosystem, largely of an anchor, bringing the different stakeholders together, but also making sure that those unique perspectives that they have somehow leverage and come together into a shared perspective, and everybody walks the same common path. So there are dedicated documents, follow-ups, SOPs around it, and that really takes care of the convergence. So yeah, and I won't say that there isn't wasted resources. Even convergence has a lot of wastage of resources. It's difficult. It's difficult to get data from different people. Duplication of data becomes very, very common because everybody is eating from that same plate in some sense. Everybody wants to keep that 10% program management cut, even if so many people probably are not required to manage the program, but that's just part and parcel of the game. It is still cost saving compared to everybody doing things independently, I would say, as long as there's an intention to really solve for the problem bigger
Right.
than what they are doing right now.
And how hard and easy is it to work with state and central governments? And is it easier as UNICEF and harder as, say, a Sehgal Foundation?
So I will draw it from my personal experience, that because I have tried working with government in my earlier roles as well, and it has been at least 20 times more difficult than what it is at UNICEF. Here, if I write one email, I'm sure that if I don't get a response and if I make 2 calls, I will get a response. Somebody or the other will connect me, and at least as UNICEF, I know that I have a guaranteed meeting with a secretary or a joint secretary. It might take time because they have busy schedules. I'm not saying that I call them today and I get it tomorrow, but I know that I will be able to manage that. So I think that's the good part, and that makes the life easier in the sense, because if you're starting a conversation at that level, there's already a buy-in in some sense, versus if you go to the state level, as many, there are things that are largely in the control of state governments as well, but if there are centrally managed programs, then even if we work with one state government, eventually to replicate that proof of concept in the other state means at some point in time you have to go to central government. So the starting point for us is always to start with central government. If it doesn't work after a lot of attempts, that's when we probably want to start with the state government. Otherwise, with government, it's just easier to work if you take a top-down approach, because then you have everybody's blessings from the start of the project, and that just makes life easier, versus approaching somebody who really can't take the decision, and who will eventually do the paperwork, take it to secretary for approval eventually. Yeah, so I would, and yeah, I think to your question regarding, yes, UNICEF brand name does work. It's a very plain, open answer, versus if I was in any other NGO, and the experience that I have had in multiple other roles that I have had, it's very, very difficult to even get one meeting, versus being at UNICEF just helps solve that.
Right. Okay, so I'll just now open the floor to questions. I think either you can post it in chat, or you can ask, since we are a limited number of people, if you want to directly ask, I think you can just directly ask Shruti any questions.
Yeah, I'd like to ask. Hi
Sure,
again.
go ahead.
I'm Shruti. So Shruti, great work experience that you have shared. So one thing that I want to directly ask you is, since the time that you have started this journey, and the experience that you have been gaining, and there's a lot of things that you're trying to do, and many levers that you're playing with. I think you touch one thing, and there are 100 other things that you need to think about in your work. So on a personal level, what is your objective, or is there something that you're actually looking to, some transformation that you are looking to, or is it just a work in progress? Because the scale, the population of the country, or in general, the kind of work that you're trying to do, I think it's a work in progress always. So personally, what gives you satisfaction, and what are you looking forward to, let's say, in some time? What is the change that you're looking forward to?
Very, I don't know, very interesting question, because that's something that I deal with almost like sort of existential crisis that hits once in a month at least, to understand what is it that I'm trying to aim towards. I think it's a mix of both. On a day-to-day basis, I would say I am not always thinking about the long-term goal that what I'm solving towards. It's almost like, okay, I will do my best at this. This is something that excites me. This is something that this is what I had always wanted to do. So I will just do it like diligently and wholeheartedly. But yeah, there are days when I do think about where I want to get. I don't have any answers to 10 years down the line what I want to do with the work that I've done. I think one thing that I always got very sure of was that I did want to impact the whole gender equality thing in some way. I do that a lot at personal level as well, and we can always talk about it later. Would be happy to share instances of it. But even in my profession, I think that's one thing that I have always made sure in all the programs that I push deep to make sure that that part of it sustains. Whether I'm working in employment space or skilling space or any other space probably then becomes secondary. But I think working towards gender equality has always been the dream that I wanted to live, and I want to make sure that that's where I make some dent few years down the line. But having said that, the world that we live in, and the ecosystem that we are, the country that we are, the social problems always keep evolving. It never ends. One thing gets sorted, but then there's another type of problem that comes up with another context. And it's interesting while it's sad to see those problems coming, it's also interesting to start thinking about how to solve them. So it's an ever evolving space, I would say.
Okay, great to know. And the work that you're dealing with, so like what are your major resistances that you face at different levels? Like, for example, you are doing policy advocacy, and you think this can actually create a lot of impact, but then I think you might face resistance at different levels. So what would that actually be?
You mean what kind of resistances do I
Or
face in policy
bottlenecks or challenges in your work? Because now you are in a much better position, like you said, you are in the UNICEF. So even at that level, when a lot of people feel this can actually impact a lot of things and create change, but then what are the kind of resistances that you face, maybe at the field level or the government level? What is it?
Yeah, no, I think, look, resistances are still the same, especially policy advocacy. As small as it seems as a word, it's a big thing. Like, even to get one line changed in policy takes years and tons of data and research and ground level work around it, right? No policy gets changed that easily, by the way, unless it's being just done in a hush hush for some other agenda. But the challenges that I face is very similar. So as UNICEF, I am also working in a diplomat sort of organization, right? So I can make recommendations. And the government is likely to listen to me a little more because of the credibility that the whole UN system brings to the ecosystem. But they are not bound to accept it, right? They can always say that what you have got to me is not what I want. And I have better research. I have other consulting companies coming to me and they have given me something which is backed by a stronger quality data, and I would like to trust that and adapt that. So those challenges still persist. But yeah, just the fact that we bring credibility and having that power to convene people and go together, uh, instead of people going in isolation to the government and asking for some sort of a change or amendment, I think that just makes the game stronger.
Got it. Okay, thank you. I'll probably connect with it.
Sure.
Okay, so I think Chidambaram sir has asked a question. Why are we concentrating only on skill transfer for livelihood development and not asset sharing or asset transfer?
I think you would be in a better position to answer that, Vidul, because that's what you were just asking earlier.
Yeah, I mean, so sir, I think what I'd just like to quickly highlight is that so the government is actually like the government scheme, because I have worked on the two key schemes with Ministry of Rural Development. They are actually working on creating resource centers at block levels where this asset transfer and asset sharing can take place. And honestly, my experience says that only the government is in a place to sort of fund for and sort of take that to the next level. For most other organizations, to show the impact of asset sharing and asset transfer over a shorter term period becomes difficult, because I mean the cycles of funding etc. did mandate that you show impact quickly for next year etc. Right? So the government is doing that, but again the struggle is to do it at scale. I think it's in some areas it works well, where there is continuous leadership, there is like sort of local community ownership, etc. But the challenge really that the government is also facing is how do we do it at scale, right?
Also, I
So
don't think there is enough evidence or study to say, I mean, in some cases, I know that direct benefit cash transfer has worked really well, but not in all sorts of programming. It may or it may not work because we don't know where that money goes has been the biggest challenge always, right? Whether it really fulfills the agenda that it's being given for. If assets are created as a shared resource, whether people will be able to maintain it or not, the wear and tear associated with it, that's where it really trickles down to eventually.
Yeah. So I think there is one question about the reasons for failure of youth skilling programs in India. Are there any difference in livelihood programs in North India and South India, especially Tamil Nadu? If you want to take that.
I wouldn't say that the youth skilling programs have failed completely. There is a component of it that hasn't achieved the potential that it had to, but it's also to do with the fact that one, the cost is high, of course, but at that cost, I mean, whatever they can do, they are doing at their best. But demand supply gap has been always a major issue. And initially, when the programming started, it was very supply driven. People were trained in bulk, but without even really mapping the job opportunities. Then in the next phase of it, when they realized that demand mapping is the way for it and it should be demand driven, then they first started collecting jobs, which is why Sector Skills Council came into place and they started generating, aggregating jobs, etc. Now the problem is really of matching. I mean, if you mobilize enough people and then migrate them, they are not likely to retain because the salaries are so less. At 10,000 rupees, if a person is moving, 2,000 kilometers away from their home, managing their food, home, everything by themselves, there's no way that they want to retain. So 3 months and they're out of work. They don't want to live there, or else they will switch jobs. Only to realize that it may not, in the first place, they may not even have needed that much of training, or they are not even making use of the amount of training for which the government had invested so much of money and given them free training at all. It could have probably been possible at much lesser cost and with much lesser skills. So those are the challenges because of which the placement rate, I think, is still stuck at somewhere around 60-65%, and retention rate is maybe even lesser, around
Even lower.
55%. Yeah, I mean, in reality, it's lower. I'm just talking about what is
Yeah,
there
yeah,
on the
yeah.
government documents. But yeah, so it is stuck at lower levels because of these kind of challenges, but it has shown some success in that sense. Then I think all the skilling organizations are for-profit organizations. They are more concerned about their money instead of making sure that people get employment which is really effective, and then they retain back in employment opportunities, right? There's a money component that's attached at every level of work that they do for the government, and they are only concerned about making their money. And of course, there are other like huge narrative stories around people leaving last 20%. They were fine with not taking money for placements, and they were okay to let people go after training. They were okay to bear those losses and not being interested in placements. In terms of North India and South India, I am not too sure. I don't think I would. I don't think there is a lot of livelihood, like program related difference in that sense. Maybe in terms of opportunities, there are more opportunities in South India, I feel. Uh, uh, Especially because of all the industrial setup and, around Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, etc. In these areas, there are a lot more employment opportunities actually. But I don't see, like in terms of programming, I don't see a lot of difference that there are programs in North India which are better or in South India which are better. That's just like, that's my observation.
Okay, I think that's it from our side. If there are no more questions, and I think we are also like good on time. So okay, so probably I'd just like to thank Shruti for taking out time and sharing her experiences and speaking so much. I'm sure she wants to drink a lot of water also now. And thank you to IAA for giving us this opportunity to share our thoughts. And thank you to everyone who joined in and cared to listen to whatever we had to say. And I hope we can all engage meaningfully with whatever was discussed in our own sort of roles and take the mission and vision of Dr. Kurian forward in our own little ways. Thank you so much, everyone. Back to Richie.
Thank you, everyone.
So thank you, Shruti, and thank you, Mridul. It was such a mesmerizing conversation, really, that, normally when we are in a discussion like this, I will have some questions at least. But I really wanted to hear more and more from Shruti, and I was like, okay, just keep talking. It was so nice, really. So wonderful to hear your journey, Shruti, and learn how. I think the best thing that I really liked what you shared. I mean, you shared everything was like mesmerizing for me, but what I really, really liked was how candid you were and the thoughts that you shared. You know, if you ask somebody, ki, what is your long-term goal or why do you do certain things and all that, I mean, the way you explained that, see, it's not always that you want to have that long-term objective in mind when you're doing something. I think it was so much from the heart, really. Thank you so much for being so truthful and sharing. I'm sure that whatever number of members have joined today, and those who have not joined, they will definitely come back on our YouTube channel and would love to watch your session and would definitely gain tremendously. They stand to gain tremendously from this interaction. Extremely grateful to Shruti and Mridul for this interaction. And I would also like to take this opportunity to welcome and thank you our IAAEC members here who joined this session. Ritesh and Shefali, thank you for being here and motivating us and taking initiatives which are really going to be very fruitful for the community. Thank you, everyone, and we will meet again in the next session. Thank you, everyone, once again.
Thank you so much, Richie.